Welcome back to Klepper's Corner. Today in history. Today we are diving into February 14th. Yes, the day we all associate with heart-shaped chocolate, overpriced roses, and reminders that romance is largely a marketing ploy. But historically, February 14th has hosted so many civilizational turning points that Cupid should really put down the bow and pick up a hard hat. This is less a holiday and more a recurring historical sinkhole. So let's explore why this date functions like the universe's favorite place to drop major plot twists. Segment 1. Saints, scapegoats, and a very poorly timed fatwa. February 14th begins its resume with Valentine's Day itself. Born from a mashup of pagan fertility rites, a martyred priest, and a medieval poet who basically said, "What if birds did romantic monogamy? And we blamed humans for it." Geoffrey Chaucer took one look at mid-February bird mating season and decided we should all buy cards forever. But the day also brings some of humanity's least romantic plot lines, like the 1349 Strasbourg massacre, where local leaders decided the best pandemic policy was, apparently, genocide plus debt relief. Turns out if you owe a Jewish moneylender a lot of cash and the Black Death is making everyone panic, suddenly, maybe they poisoned the well becomes a surprisingly convenient campaign slogan. And then, leap forward 640 years to 1989. Ayatollah Khomeini's fatwa against Salman Rushdie. Imagine writing a novel and suddenly half the planet is arguing about you on international television before Twitter even exists. Global riots, diplomatic collapses, and a bounty big enough to make Dog the Bounty Hunter rethink his career path. All because of a dream sequence in a book. February 14th, where love letters, pogroms, and international literary manhunts coexist like an extremely dysfunctional family reunion. Segment 2. The rise and fall, and rise again, of empires, kings, and a kid in Punjab. If February 14th had a hobby, it would be overthrowing governments. Start with King Richard II, who believed deeply in the divine right of kings and not quite deeply enough in feeding himself in captivity. On this day in 1400, the deposed monarch died in Pontefract Castle after being starved out by his cousin, Henry Bolingbroke. Proof that the line between royalty and guy locked in a basement with no snacks is surprisingly thin. Then, in 1556, teenage Akbar the Great is crowned Mughal emperor, 14 years old. I couldn't even coordinate my locker combination at 14. Akbar, meanwhile, was unifying a continent, reforming taxation, abolishing religious discrimination, and inventing a new philosophical religion. And we wonder why modern teenagers are stressed. They've got some tough historical benchmarks. And then there's Captain James Cook, history's ultimate I come in peace, but also with imperialism explorer. His February 14th, 1779, ended in a chaotic misunderstanding, a tactical kidnapping attempt, and his violent death in Hawaii. Let this be a reminder. If your diplomatic strategy involves kidnap the local king, you are already losing. Empires rise, fall, and occasionally get stabbed on a beach. February 14th contains all of these options. Segment 3. When invention meets lawyers. Polk, bell, and a giant room full of vacuum tubes. Now we pivot from kings and conflict to technology, because February 14th also loves a good gadget. In 1849, President James K. Polk sits for the first presidential photograph. Before this, leaders could hide behind flattering portraits. But the camera? That thing is brutal. Suddenly, the president looks like a real person. Tired face, unfortunate haircut, probably wishing he'd done more with his eyebrows. Then comes the Patent Office showdown of 1876. Bell and Gray race to file paperwork for the telephone. Bell wins by hours. Gray loses because his lawyer basically said, "Let's just give up." Western Union smugly ignores Bell's offer to buy the patent, proving that even 19th century CEOs were capable of absolutely catastrophic business decisions. And finally, ENIAC, unveiled in 1946, the first gigantic electronic computer. 18,000 vacuum tubes, miles of wiring, and the energy usage of a small European town. It was programmed largely by brilliant women mathematicians whose work got overshadowed for decades. ENIAC didn't just calculate artillery tables. It kicked off the computational age and proved that the future would be built by people who understood both mathematics and overheating hardware. February 14th. Never underestimate a holiday that jumpstarts photography, telephony, and computing before most people have finished their Valentine's brunch. Segment 4. Firestorms, mobsters, and the nuclear shadow. The Violence File. Of course, February 14th wouldn't be complete without humanity's worst instincts sending a greeting card. In 1929, Chicago mobsters delivered the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. 7 men lined up and executed by Capone's gang pretending to be cops. A brilliant strategy if your relationship to law enforcement is the costume is doing most of the work. Then, in 1945, the Dresden firebombing produces one of the most devastating and morally fraught civilian tragedies in World War II. A city famous for culture becomes a firestorm so hot that asphalt melts. It exposes the dark paradox of total war. The line between military targets and psychological terror becomes frighteningly thin. Jump forward to 2019, Pulwama. A suicide bombing kills 40 Indian paramilitary personnel and triggers the first Indian airstrike inside Pakistan's non-disputed territory since 1971. Because apparently the 21st century looked at centuries of warfare and said, let's speed run escalation. Every February 14th, history pauses the romance and says, here is a reminder that humans sometimes make extremely bad choices. Segment 5. Statehood, soft power, and people who decided enough was enough. Not every February 14th is tragedy. Some are expansion, reform, or resistance. Oregon and Arizona both joined the Union on this date. Oregon in 1859, Arizona in 1912. It's like the United States saved Valentine's Day for states that wanted to give the nation a giant Be Mine card, but with more mining rights and territorial disputes. Then, in 1962, Jacqueline Kennedy gives America its first televised White House tour. 80 million people tune in. It's the Super Bowl of historic preservation. And Jackie wins an Emmy. Imagine telling George Washington that one day the First Lady would win a television award for showing people where he used to keep the furniture. Then there's Bahrain in 2011. Citizens take to the streets hoping to achieve the Arab Spring's wave of democratic reform. Instead, they face overwhelming force and foreign military intervention. A heartbreaking reminder that not every uprising gets its revolution arc. And finally, Parkland, 2018. A tragedy that sparks a student-led movement so successful, so politically savvy, that lawmakers, especially in Florida, suddenly discover an ability to pass gun legislation they had previously misplaced behind decades of excuses. It turns grief into activism, and activism into measurable change. February 14th is chaotic, contradictory, and occasionally hopeful, much like democracy itself. Segment 6. What February 14th really tells us about ourselves. So what does it all mean? Why does February 14th seem to host humanity's greatest hits and greatest mistakes? Maybe it's a calendar coincidence. Maybe it's cosmic irony. Or maybe, and I lean toward this, the date reveals the underlying truth of human history. That civilization is always balancing between love and violence, science and superstition, empire and uprising, innovation and collapse. One day we're creating photography and telephone networks. Another day we're burning cities, banning books, and overthrowing monarchs. February 14th is a mirror, and what it reflects is us. Ambitious, flawed, brilliant, terrified, and occasionally capable of truly extraordinary resilience. In conclusion, February 14th reminds us that history is not a straight line, but a chaotic heart monitor tracing the highs, lows, and arrhythmias of the human experiment. So the next time you hand someone a Valentine, just remember, Beneath all that pink glitter lies a date responsible for revolutions, tragedies, scientific revolutions, social movements, and at least one extremely ill-fated British explorer. And maybe that's the real lesson. Love is temporary, but history keeps showing up every February 14th, whether we're ready or not.